Hello, everybody. Welcome to Counselor's Couch 101. I am Jim Stump. One of the standard questions I ask all new clients is whether they've been to counseling before, whether or not it was successful, ask them what worked and what didn't, because I'd like to repeat the things that did well, and I'd like to not repeat the things that failed in the past. If any of you would like to share your experiences in counseling, please email me at counselorscouch101@mail.com, just mail.com. We won't use your name or anything, but we'd like to share these experiences so other people in the audience can learn and from experiences of all of us who have been through it. I asked that question to a gentleman not too long ago, and he told me that he had gone to couples counseling. This was in another state. It was a long time ago, and it was with a wife at that time. He'd gone to couples counseling. He went in there. He said the counselor was a young guy, and he talked for the entire time. When the man I was speaking to tried to ask a question, the counselor cut him off, wouldn't even let him speak. He just kept going on and on and on. The man told me, he said, I don't even know what this guy was talking about. It was just stuff that was completely irrelevant to my life, my experience, and my reason for being there. And he would not let me talk. At about 15 minutes before the close of the session, I tried to break in. He wouldn't let me do it. 10 minutes, I tried to just speak over him and ask a question. He said something to the effect of I was being rude, right? And the gentleman was really put off. He was really steamed before he even left the room. Now, do you suppose that man went back to counseling? Do you think he went back to counseling with that counselor? Well, absolutely not. Not only that, he told me later on he divorced that wife. So that's what happened with that. We don't want to repeat those kinds of circumstances. Now, I stop and think, why would that counselor, that my client told me he seemed to be a young man. So I was wondering if that counselor was either an intern or newly licensed, but clearly he was uncomfortable. He couldn't allow the clients to speak and let their wishes and their needs be known. So there was something going on with that counselor. It was not the client that was at fault in that situation. It reminded me of when I was an intern and I was working with groups. Typically, we work at agencies when we're studying and we're learning because we get mentorship there. We are taught how to do the craft and etc. And we experience working with more senior interns. People are there close to being licensed and so forth because we can learn from watching them work with the groups and with their clients. So my first day on this particular agency, I was placed into a men's group meeting. There were 25 men at least in the room, which already was a failure. You can't talk to 25 people in an hour. It just doesn't get done, right? We don't get into any depth. Nothing of real substance comes up in a conversation like that. Can't take the time to do it. So right there, that was a failure of design. Someone was just trying to make a little bit extra cash, put as many people in the room as the room would hold, not as many people as the counseling session would deal with well, but just how many people the room would hold. So I went in there, and as we were walking into the room, I was with an older intern. That is to say, someone who's further along in the training than I was. And she told me, she says, I'm going to pass it to you sometime, so you feel free to take it over whenever you want. Feel free to participate, say, share your thoughts, your suggestions, or anything else you have as we're going along. I said, fine. And we went into the room, and we sat down, and she introduced me, and she said, maybe Jim would like to start the meeting, right? So she threw the ball to me. And I said to the group, I said, I'm interested in what you're all thinking about and what sorts of things, what issues are on your mind and how we can help you. Well, immediately the older intern, she broke in right there and she started talking about, well, we don't have time to go around the room and do all of that. But I think it would be helpful was to talk about the way these people are experiencing their lives, and they're all drug users. She was talking about the chemical reaction in the body, SSRIs, and all sorts of things like that. So she cut me off. She didn't let me speak. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's all right. I was a bit nervous. I was new, and I wasn't sure as to what I was doing anyway, so let her talk, right? The meeting ran 90 minutes. This intern spoke for 90 minutes. She didn't let anyone get a word in. She didn't ask any questions. She wasn't interested in what anyone else in the room might have been interested in, the types of issues they might have had, um, how they might have benefited from that conversation. She didn't take any sort of an inventory whatsoever. She kept talking about brain chemistry and body reactions to substances, et cetera, and how drug use and alcohol use was going to damage the brain and other parts of the body. She went on and on and on. As I'm sitting there, and I wasn't even listening to her, I had no interest in what she was saying either, right? I'm looking around the room. This one gentleman, way across the circle, we were sitting in a circle, way across the circle on the other side, he looked at me. He was staring at her just like this, and then he rolled his head over to the side and looked at me like that and rolled his head back like that. I just chuckled because I felt exactly the same way he did. This woman talked for 90 minutes. She finally told everybody it was a great meeting. Thanks for coming. Make sure you come back again because it works and like that. And when people were going out of the room, she said to me, that went well, I think. And I stopped and I thought, what the heck is going on here? This is a person who's supposed to be licensed soon, and this is the way she treats her groups. I was rather puzzled, but I sort of figured I knew what was going on with her, that is. But she was the one who was supposed to be the expert, so I let it go at the time. And then later on, when I was licensed and I was training interns and counselors who were coming up, I had occasion to work with this one young man, and we were in the room, and I remember the experiences I had when I was not allowed to speak in group meetings because the interns would always take it over. They always seemed to feel that what they were talking about was more important and that I couldn't possibly add anything to the meeting. So they usually just took it over and ran with it. So knowing that, I tried to let my interns run the meetings. I would talk to them outside the meeting. I would talk to them before meetings, and we'd sort of go over the meeting after the meeting to see what we could learn from it and improve technique and like that, right? So we were in this one meeting, and I kept my client numbers down because I knew we couldn't talk with 25, 30 people in a room. Nobody's going to talk. Either someone's going to dominate or nothing is going to get done. So I kept my client numbers down. There were about 8 people in this meeting. The intern was running the meeting. He had planned out a topic he was going to discuss. He was following a program that was laid out for him, and he was presenting it to the clients at the time. And so he began the meeting, and he told them about the introductory information that he wanted them all to have. And then 5-10 minutes into the meeting, he asked a question. I don't even remember what the question was, but he said, I have a question for you, and he asked the question. Well, the 8 clients in the room didn't say anything, right? They were quiet, which I didn't find unusual at all. People are not going to be the first to speak. It's uncomfortable and like that. After about 15 seconds of silence, the client said, nobody has an answer. Okay, I'll answer. And he started talking. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Now, maybe I shouldn't have done that in the room, right? But I just said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, you asked a question. I would like to hear the answer. And I could see that he was really, I don't want to say humiliated, but he was taken aback that I had broken into his presentation and so forth. He kind of had that look of dejection on his face. But we waited in silence for a few seconds. Then one client started talking, and then a second client responded to the first client, and so on and so forth. And in a few minutes, we had a lively conversation going on the topic. All the members of the group, the 8 members, the 8 clients, were participating and involved in the session, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted them talking, not the intern, right? Looking back on those 3 incidents, oh, by the way, that particular intern, all of a sudden he took a disliking to me and he didn't want to work with me, etc. And it was very clear. And so I let him go on and study with someone else because I obviously wasn't going to be able to help him. I think he felt embarrassed by that particular incident. I didn't think it was a big deal. I don't think the clients barely even noticed. They weren't much paying attention to the exchange that I was having with him. They were involved in their own thoughts, and they all participated, and they had a great meeting because we opened it up and we let them talk. But a couple of things that made it work. First of all, there were only 8 clients in the room, not 25, not 30, only 8. Any more than that, it gets to be a crowd and people don't talk. And second of all, I waited. I was perfectly willing to sit in the silence and wait for someone to talk and participate and start sharing what they're thinking and feeling. And then we follow that theme up, and you have yourself a good meeting, even if we didn't stick to the subject of the lesson of that day. It all gets done one way or the other. There's a hurricane down in Florida, and we're having a heat wave here in California. I'm just drying up all over the place. Anyway, what I thought was the common denominator for all three of these counseling situations was I think the counselors were not comfortable. I think they were anxious. They could not sit in silence and wait for someone to speak, right? They had to fill the air with noise. The first counselor with the couple, he apparently was, I'm guessing he was intimidated by the man. The man was a pretty big guy, right? Nice guy, willing to talk. He really came to get some help. He wasn't there to waste his time or waste mine or anyone else's, right? But he was a big guy and he could be intimidating. Maybe that young counselor, or maybe he was an intern, felt uncomfortable in his presence. I don't know, but he didn't let the man speak. In the second situation, the intern that I was sitting with, the 25 guys in the room, she talked for 90 minutes. She said nothing of which I had an interest in. The clients had no interest in it. She was wasting time. And when she was done with the meeting, she turned to me and said, I think that went pretty well, don't you? I'm thinking to myself, I think you missed the train, lady. But God bless her. I think she was anxious too. She couldn't sit in silence and allow someone the space to open up and participate. And with the third situation with the intern, I know he was anxious. He didn't feel comfortable sitting in the room. He might have done better in the room with the group if I were not there. But it's easier to get a group going once you experience what it's supposed to be like, what a successful group is, how the dynamic and the interaction goes. When you see that, when you get to take part in it and get to understand how much benefit it can have for people, then you're much more comfortable being quiet and giving clients the time to respond. So, anxious. If you find yourself in a counseling situation and someone is talking all the time, you got to figure they're anxious. Now, if you can calm them down, by all means do so. Make some comment. I don't know what you would say to a counselor who's talking all the time, except that maybe, may I say something? I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but I would like to, mention what I'm here for. Something like that. If that doesn't work, well, then of course I suggest you find another counselor, someone who is completely comfortable sitting in silence and letting you take the lead. If any of you out there have had any experiences with counseling sessions, um, sessions that didn't go well are great because they are great learning objects. If you could write in to me, send me an email at counselorscouch101@mail.com, just mail.com, right? Just describe it. And I'd like to use those experiences here on these video casts, if that's all right with you. I will never mention a name. I won't mention initials or the place you're from, and I'll try to disguise anything that could possibly be identified with you, unless, of course, you want to be identified. It would be helpful and instructive to all the people that come here for these videos if you'd like to share that. It'd make it much more interesting and we get some sort of a dynamic going between all of us. So I invite you, send me your story of counseling, whether it worked or whether it didn't work. By the way, I just asked you for a negative example. If you have a positive example, please send that along. Why did it work? How did the counselor connect with you, or you with the counselor? What made it work? Those are very instructive as well. Anything you could send along would be a benefit to everyone who comes here to listen. So I invite you to do that. If you have a counselor who talks all the time and leaves no space for you, I suggest you look around for someone else. I don't think that person's going to help you much. I think they might want to. Maybe they just don't know how. Thank you for dropping by. I'll talk with you next time.